All right. So we are talking about some signal classification, right? So we classified signals as continuous versus discrete, analog versus digital, periodic, aperiodic, uh, classify them as real valued or complex valued. We have been looking at a real valued signal so far. And then sort of the last classification we looked at was causal versus non-causal. And this was for signals, right? And we sketched up some arbitrary signals, F1, F2, F3, that are causal, anti-causal, or non-causal. Today we'll start talking about another classification, which is energy versus power signal. So that is mainly used for size of the signal. You're using uh, energy or power to determine the size of the signal. So at this time, you guys should be asking, in order to talk about the size of the signal, why is he talking about energy? Why not just amplitude? Uh, right. So one is time. Uh, so let me rephrase my question here. Would I be able to comment about the size of the signal if it was just instantaneous? Say instantaneous power. Could I talk about the size? So time is one parameter that is involved. But why am I not using amplitude? How is the frequency going to change for, so we are talking about the size of the signal, right? Do you have a large signal or do you have a small signal? So when you actually sketch it out, if things have low amplitude, you might say these are smaller signals. Things have large amplitude, you might say there's a big signal. So why are we not using amplitude, but instead using energy, and we will later use power? So the question is, to comment about the size of the signal, we are using energy. Why didn't we use? While you guys are thinking about that, let me reload and fire away another question. Amplitude, can it be positive? Sure. Can it be negative? What if it is negative 100 volts? Is that really big signal or small signal? It's a very, very large signal. You guys see that? So in terms of if you were talking about amplitude, it could go really high or it could go really, really low. But you wouldn't necessarily talk about positive amplitudes as big signals and negative as small signals. You would in fact talk about their big or small nature depending on their energy. That is the reason why we need to do a square of the signal, right? You guys see that? Why we are not using amplitude as a sign of size? We need to use energy or power. Yeah? All right. So, energy of f of t. How do we do that? Well, if f of t is real, then there's no point taking the magnitude. You can just square it, right? What are you doing? If you have f of t as a sinusoid, you're doing a sine square. If f of t is t, then you're doing a t squared. Whatever that signal is, you're taking the magnitude of that signal f of t and you're squaring it. That will give you energy as a function of time, right? And you do that integral. So you accumulate all that by doing an integration of time from negative infinity to infinity, and that will give you energy in f of t. Now you can also, by the way, what is this symbol? What is that symbol right there? Is equivalent to E of f. EF is equal to that integral. The two vertical lines are indicating the magnitude of f of t, which also means that if it was a complex number, I would need to find the magnitude of that complex number and then do the square. and then you integrate from all time, at least all the time for which f of t is non-zero, right? If it is zero, then you don't accumulate any energy there. You can also express the same E of f, EF, as a limit. So what you can do is you can observe a signal from negative t to t, you can find out its magnitude squared, and then you can stretch that t out to infinity. They are both the same, right? They're both the same equation. So that will give you energy. It might be zero, it might be some finite number, or it might be infinity. Let's do a quick example here. We have some real valued signal. It is zero for time less than zero. No, it is not zero for time less than zero. It actually is zero for time less than -1. It is constant between -1 and 0, and then exponential after time 0, right? So it goes 0, then 2, then 2e to the negative t over 2, right? Some arbitrary signal. And I'm supposed to find the energy of the signal. What am I going to do? Well, I can quickly do some math here and figure this out. So EF is going to equal, how do I set my limits here? Do I need to go from negative infinity to infinity? Or maybe I can just go from -1 to 0, 0 to, oh no, sorry, -2 to -1, -1 to 0, and 0 to infinity, right? I can break it up into 3 integrals. And in fact, I don't even need the first integral, right? Because it's 0. Between -2 and -1, it is 0, so I don't even need to do that. I only need to do -1 to 0. Over there, f of t is 2, magnitude of f of t is 2, and the square of that will be 4. And then I need to add that to what? 0, infinity, 2e to the negative t over 2. What will be the magnitude of that? It will be the same thing, right? It's a real valued signal, so the magnitude of that is going to be the same thing. And then square it. When you square it, what are you going to get? This 2 is going to disappear. Too big. And then this guy is going to become 4. Yeah. I need to solve that integral to find the energy of this signal. So let's do that. What is this? The first one is going to be, it is 4 for 1 time unit. Yeah. What is the other thing going to be? When you integrate 4e to the negative t, you get 4e to the negative t divided by -1. The limits are infinity 0. What is that going to be? 4 plus e to the negative 0 plus 1. Yeah. It is a finite energy signal. You sense power or energy, not amplitude. Yes, but amplitude could be lower. So a smaller amplitude, -100, wouldn't mean bigger signal. It would actually mean bigger signal. So that's why you do the energy or power. Uh, Questions about how we solve this elementary integral? When do you guys do this? Middle school, maybe? No? Kindergarten? No? All right, let's move on to the power of the signal. Yes, we can have interaction now. So let's leverage that. Let's use that. Let's do that. All right, size of a signal. We're talking about two different types of signals here, energy signal versus a power signal. If the energy is finite, you classify that as an energy signal. If the power is finite, you classify that as a power signal. Which also should tell you that a signal, if it is an energy signal, then it is not a power signal. What is power? Well, it's just the average energy. over a specific amount of time, right? Average energy of f of t over some time duration. For periodic signals, because you're computing that average energy, if you have a periodic signal, then you only need to find the power for one period. So power for one period is going to be the power of the signal. In this case, we have a sawtooth signal that is shown over here. We are going to evaluate its power. The formula is going to change just a little bit. How did it change? Now we have that limit, we have that integration going from negative t to t. So that's a time interval of 2t. So in order, we are just going to divide that by 1 over 2t. And then we are evaluating that as t tends to infinity. So that's your power. Let's evaluate that for this signal. In order to evaluate that for this signal, I'm going to consider, or I'm going to evaluate the power only for one period, because it's an average, right? I don't need to do for multiple periods. I can only need to do it for one period. So let me do it for this guy. Just there. My t becomes what? My cap t is what? Actually, let's move it over here. From here to here. Let's do it there. What should I set my cap t as? 1, right? So then I got negative 1 to 1, right? Wow, you guys should tell me this. All right. I can do the best I can. I will slip up. You guys need to keep me honest on these things. All right. So let's see. Set t as 1. If I set t as 1, I'm essentially saying the time period of this guy is from negative 1 to 1. So that's a total time period of 2. But I only need to evaluate it from negative 1 to 1. So from negative 1 to 1 over here. So I'm evaluating power for one time period, and I'm saying that that is the power of the signal because it's a periodic signal. If something is periodic, I evaluate the power of one time period versus I evaluate the power of the total signal. They are going to be one and the same because it's an average. What do I get? I'm going to need to evaluate what f of t is during that time, negative 1 to 1. So can you guys tell me what that is? That equation is? Who is really good with equation of line? I am. Go ahead. Yes, geometry. Yeah. Y equals mx plus c type thing. T, right? Passes through the origin, has a slope of 1. So in 2 seconds, it rises 2, right? And it passes through. So no y-intercept. You guys need to be very comfortable with this kind of thing, right? All right, so we have got f of t during that time period. I think we can start doing the integration now. So pf is going to be limit t tends to infinity 1 over 2t. So 2 times 1. I've got 2 there. Integral negative 1 to 1. What would be magnitude of f of t squared? Well, magnitude of t is t. Square it, you're going to get t squared. All right. Limit is going to carry over. Half is going to remain. T cubed divided by 3. The limits are 1 and negative 1. That's what you are going to have. So if you do this, what are you going to get? Limit t tends to infinity 1 over 2. Yeah? What is that? 1 over 3, right? Did I do things right? Paw Patrol taught me stuff. Yes. So 1 over 3, 1 over 3, 2 over 3, 2 to cancel, 1 over 3 remains. Go ahead. So the vertical line is where it transitions, right, from high to low and low to high. So we are treating that as a discontinuity in the signal. So you should really look at the signal as line, 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 line. But because we are doing it in a continuous fashion, we are just joining those edges. Go ahead. So that T is the whole time I'm observing the signal for. Expanding that out to, and because we got it independent. All right. Other questions? Power of the signal equals power of. Oh, negative of negative, right? So T cubed. So negative 1, negative 1, negative 1, you get negative from there. And then because it's a lower limit to the definite integral, you have a negative for that. So you've got like 4 negatives all cancelling out, right? Don't worry about it, we'll get there. All right, so 1/3. So this has finite power. So let's talk about the signal classification now. Energy versus a power signal. The energy signal is a signal in which energy is less than infinity. In other words, it is finite. If you find energy of a signal to be finite, just the way we did, you got 8 units, that would be classified as an energy signal. So the obvious next question is, what is the power of an energy signal? If it is an energy signal, all we know is energy is finite. What is the power of that signal? Well, we can compute that by evaluating the power of the signal, right? The equation over there, average energy over time. And when we said energy is finite, this became finite. You guys agree with that? That is the energy, right? From before, that's the energy. So that is finite. You take something finite, 2, 4, 110, whatever finite number it is, and then you are dividing it by 1 over t, 2t, while t tends to infinity. What are you going to get? The power of an energy signal, 0. Next, let's do the same thing, but the other way. Power of a signal, if that is finite, not including 0 and infinity, that is going to be classified as a power signal. Next question, what is going to be the energy of a power signal? What do you guys think? Energy is defined as this. That's what we are trying to evaluate. Good. Infinite, right? So we can play a small trick here, which is instead of saying limit t tends to infinity, directly going into the energy equation, what we can do is multiply and divide by 2t. When you multiply and divide by 2t, you are going to be looking at the average energy because you have that 1 over 2t. That is finite, right? All of this is finite. That's your power. That's finite. The only difference is you have an additional 2t over here with t tends to infinity to get energy. Because of that, it is going to be infinity. You guys see that? So this is, let me, if I call this a power signal, then this value will be between 0 and infinity, right? Some finite value, some finite positive value. If you take that and multiply it with 2t to get energy, and as you take the limit t tends to infinity, you have got infinity times a finite number giving you infinity. You guys see that? So energy of a power signal and power of an energy signal you will be able to compute by this way. 0 for power and energy infinity for the energy and power signal respectively. Questions here? Next. The first 2 points over here are just summarizing things that we just um, looked at. Energy signal, f of t is an energy signal if its energy is less than infinity. Signal if the power is between 0 and infinity, excluding 0 and infinity. And because we have found these two things, we can say a signal cannot be a power and energy signal at the same time. Because if it is a power signal, we know that the energy is going to be 0, which does not qualify it to be a power signal. You see that? Yeah? So cannot be power and energy at the same time. However, you can have a signal that is neither a power signal nor an energy signal. That you can have. What would be an example? An example would be f of t equals t, something that is linearly increasing. As time increases, it is linearly increasing, right? So it is going to be a signal which energy as well as time, as well as power is going to evaluate to be infinity, making it neither. And you can say let's evaluate energy here. Energy of is that fine? T cube divided by 3, infinity, infinity, infinity. Do I need to do that in detail? You have got infinity cubed divided by 3 plus infinity cubed divided by 3, right? So energy computes as infinity, which makes it, maybe it's a power signal, right? Because it's definitely not an energy signal. You guys okay with this so far? All right, let's do power. What do you have? 2 negative t squared dt. I'm not writing the magnitude sign over here because everything is real value. All right, what are you going to get here? Let's see, limit t tends to infinity, 1 over 2t. Over there, what are you going to get? T cubed divided by 3, cap t to negative cap t. So 2t cubed divided by 3. You guys need to keep me honest with the math here, you guys. Is t the period in that specific interval or the whole graph? So cap t refers to all the time. As t tends to infinity means you're taking the signal and stretching it out to all time. But signals that are periodic For that, you only need to evaluate the power for one time period because it's going to be the same. It's an average, right? So you do 2 plus 2 plus 2 divided by 3, or you just do 2, right? So average of 3 elements is going to be the same as one element if they were all the same. Good. So what we are doing is for power signals, if the signal is periodic, we are only evaluating it for one time period. So we are playing with that number for one time period, T, cap T. All right, questions here? So here, this makes it not an energy signal and clearly not a power signal. It's possible. If it is energy, it cannot be power. If it is power, it cannot be energy. But it is possible for a signal to neither be neither. Okay, and we have mathematically proved that. All right, let's move on to, I think this was the last slide of lecture 1. I'm going to be start talking about lecture 2. Lecture 2 is going to be about these 3 topics, mainly common signals, even versus odd signals, that's another classification, and then signal operation. While we are talking about common signals, you guys will be having a very good time. While we are talking about even versus odd signals, you will have a even better time. While we are talking about signal operations, you guys will scratch your heads. So that's sort of the general trend that I've been seeing. So bear with me. I'm going to try to make it as clear as possible, but that's sort of where we are going. Signal operations is where things can get confusing. So common signal. We have already looked at a few, right? We have looked at unit step, zero step. Is there a real significance to unit step? Mathematically, we have said unit step. Do you see something like that in real life? Go ahead. Okay, switch turning off, right? Yeah, and you can take that conversation to even a lot of digital systems. But if you were strictly in the analog world, maybe you can think about force being applied to a wall, right? No force is being applied to the wall right now, and then as soon as I go and push my hand against that wall, I am maybe pushing that wall with a constant amount of force, right? So that's zero and then jump, step, right? So these things that we are talking about in mathematical, using math in a closed form, they are some approximations of things that are happening in the world, or they could happen in the real world, right? So whenever you come across a signal, you guys need to start thinking about, okay, where do I see it? In real life, can I picture it? There is one signal that is going to be the sort of the king of all signals. Can anybody guess what that signal is? The king of all signals. But unfortunately not. It's the king, so it has to have everything, right? Sinusoidal only has one frequency. Go ahead. Square wave, no, unfortunately not. So it has some good characteristics, but one frequency. Exponential, no, sorry. Guys might have not have heard it of this one. Triangle wave, no. So no, it's an impulse. It's an impulse. Goes up and down in infinitesimally small time, right? Shoots up and down. That's it. That was an impulse because it has all frequencies and it travels to zero to infinity and back to zero. All amplitudes, all frequencies. We'll get to know more about the impulse as we learn through the course, but that is a signal that I can use to characterize my LTI systems. So remember last time we were having this conversation about room, my voice, and you guys are sitting and hearing it. You guys remember that? If I wanted to characterize this room, all I would need to do is clap, record that using a microphone, and I've characterized this system, assuming that this is LTI. Now, I know everything about that system now. I've recorded its impulse response. So I can do a lot of fun experiments with that. One such example is I can record its impulse response. I can go home, record my voice at home. I can mix the two, and the output will sound as if I was saying those things in this room. You guys see that? So if you are curious about like really taking this concept far, you could, and I can help you out with that. Try to go and record an impulse in a basketball stadium with a lot of echoey aspects. Bring that to me, and then we can do like a MATLAB code in which you can record your voice at home, convolve it with the impulse response of the basketball stadium in order to and the output is going to sound as if you were saying those things not in your room but in the stadium with all those echoey aspects. So a lot of fun things you can do with um, impulse response, and you will hear me say impulse response maybe 305 times over the next 2 weeks. All right, common signal, ramp. Ramp is another oh, by the way, we were talking about unit step. We have seen that. We have also seen a rectangular signal. We have seen a constant signal. Now we are introducing ramp function to our list. And ramp is just that. 0 for time less than 0. And as soon as time goes up, you are ramping up. Now you can also scale it, right? So you can scale it at slope of 1 or slope of half or slope of 2. You can change the slope of your ramp. But R of t, which stands for ramp signal, has a slope of 1. You see that on the left, you have this sketch. For time less than 0, it is 0. And for time greater than 0, it is equal to t, right? So in terms of its bracket notation, you can say R of t is t for time greater than or equal to 0, and it is going to be 0 for time less than 0. Goes up with a slope of 1. That's your R of t. So later on in the course, I will not be talking about ramp functions. I will be talking about R of t. For unit step, I'll refer to them as U of t. Now, the second sketch over here is for a adjusted ramp function. What is that? Can you express the signal that you see over here in terms of R of t? Go ahead. 1/2 R of t. That's it. That's all we need. The only thing that changed over here is the slope of that ramp. It went down by a factor of 2. That's all we did. Half R of t. So instead of going 1 in 1, you are going 2 in 1. Right? So dy is 1, dx is 2, dy by dx, you guys see it. All right, try to come bracket notation here. Copy, Control V, and so I need to do half, and I'm done. So far in the course, we have been sort of playing around with a few ways to represent a signal, right? Can you guys maybe give me the list? So far, how have we learned to express a signal? One way is sketch it. Yeah? Either physically or in your head. 2, bracket notation. What's the third one? You're back, LT. Go ahead. No, no, no. How do you? So one way to represent a signal, like on paper, is to sketch it, right? Okay, I've sketched it over here, and then the other one is to write its bracket notation. Anyone? Right. R of t, U of t, right? Analytically. Analytical, plot it, bracket notation. Yeah? So you're seeing multiple ways to express the same thing. Why are we learning different ways? It's in the textbook? No. Go ahead. You got it. So sometimes it might be really, really easy for you to work with a certain problem graphically. The same thing if you try to do it with a bracket notation, you might spend half an hour instead of 3 minutes, right? So now you have the luxury of going from one font to the other, and depending upon which one is easier and more appropriate, you can switch to that. You had a question? So you will see this same concept play out at a very severe level as we go. There will be some times where you are hitting your head with the math and filling out pages of math, of integrations, while somebody else, because they had this different forms and different ways of solving the problem, could have done that in 2 steps. And you're going, why didn't I do that way? And the reason is you were very comfortable in one way of solving the problem, right? If you get comfortable in one way of solving the problem, that's the danger, which is why you need to start thinking about multiple ways of trying to solve the problem. And that can only happen if you know how to express things in multiple ways. So that's sort of the motivation here. All right. We have learned about unit step. We have learned about ramp, R of t. Can we go between ramp and U of t? And the answer is yes. All you need to do is integrate your step function and you get a ramp. So, you see, time less than 0, it is 0. Time greater than or equal to 0, it is 1. That's your unit step, U of t. Open the gate at 0 and don't close it, right? That's another way of saying the function. If you integrate it, what are you doing? Well, you're moving from infinity, negative infinity, to what? Some arbitrary stopping time t, right? So negative t, negative infinity to t. So you're going no area, no area, no area, no area. Okay, increasing, 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 linearly, linearly, right? So when you are below 0, you have not accumulated any area. As soon as you go above 0, you accumulate more and more area. Because you are integrating over a rectangle, your integration is going to be linear. What if it was linear and you are accumulating it? What would be the integration if instead of u of tau, this was r of tau? What would that integration become? Quadratic, right? So it's simply constant becomes t becomes t squared divided by 2, of course. And then t squared becomes t cubed, and so on, right? You guys see that? All right. So next question I want to ask you guys is this. We have used tau here, we have used t here. Why did we use two time variables? Should they have been the same? Is it a typo? They are not the same, right? Because tau is actually expressing. So can we sketch u of tau? Sure. That's u of tau, right? And now when you integrate, you're integrating from negative infinity to some time at which you stop integration, right? From here to here, here to here, here to here, here to here, right? So you're using one variable to express the signal and the other variable to do that accumulation, right? If you accumulate it for 1 second, your area would be 1, right? If t was 1, r of t would be 1. If t was 2, r of t would have been giving you an area of 2. 3, 3, 4, 4. In general, r of t will be t. You see that? Which essentially means, yes, we absolutely need two time variables. We are using tau to express unit step. We are using t to express our stopping time, arbitrary stopping time of that accumulation. Also, the reason why we are using r of t here, right? So this is t, and that's the reason we are able to get r of t. Yeah. So now you see examples in which multiple variables are required for time, right? And the same thing applies even for discrete time. In discrete time, you will have n, small m, small k, and so on. In the analog world, in the continuous world, you are going to have t, tau, t prime, and so on. But what will help is trying to figure out what is the difference in the usage, right? Like, what are you using tau for? What are you using t for? When we get to convolution, that's when the real test is, right? Because in convolution, when we start doing convolution, that's where this tau and t will throw you off. All right, once you integrate that unit step, you are going to see r of t on the right, linearly increasing signal. Questions about how do you go from a unit step to a ramp function through integration? Why are you okay? Better. All right. There is one thing that I want to point out about complex numbers. It is this particular detail is in the complex number notes that I have provided, but this is something that is not commonly discussed. So I'm going to talk about that. I have a complex plane sketched out over here where my horizontal axis is used for real part of the complex number z, and the vertical axis is used for the imaginary part of complex number z. And that complex number z, I'm writing that as a plus jb, j square root of minus 1. A, real part of z. B, imaginary part of z. If I wanted to find the phase of this complex, should I find out? Phase of z, what should I find out? Or argument of z. Huh? Complex number z is a plus jb. What is the phase of that complex number? Go ahead, anyone? Inverse tangent. Imaginary over real. Yeah? Beautiful. Where is that z? Is it in the first quadrant, second quadrant, third quadrant, fourth quadrant? Where is it? Where could it be? It depends on the signs of A and B, right? If A and B are both positive, in which case, let's say this is theta. That is theta, right? If A and B are both positive. And if A and B are both negative, then you're here in the fourth quadrant. And you can still use the same thing, tan inverse B by A, right? Both positive works. Go ahead. Oh, sorry, you're right. Yes, A is positive, B is negative, right? Okay, so I can still use that. Yes. Real part is positive, imaginary part is negative. So I'm going to get tan inverse of something negative, right? Tan inverse of something negative is going to be some negative angle. All right, I got that, right? So that's why I got a negative angle there. This is going to work when the complex number is in the first quadrant or the fourth quadrant. It's going to be fine. However, in this case, B divided by A was a positive number. Is there any other situation in which B divided by A could also be a positive number? In the third quadrant. There it is. So if the complex number is here, where B is negative, A is negative, you divide B by A, what do you get? A positive number. You do tan inverse B by A, what do you get? Some angle, right? Is that going to be the same angle as this? No. It is actually going to be the same angle as this, right? You guys see that? So if the complex number happens to be in the second quadrant or the third quadrant, then what you need to do for phase plus or minus pi. You guys see the need for that? You found out theta here, add pi or subtract pi. Doesn't matter which way you go there. So don't do that blindly by doing tan inverse b by a. Also have some sense of which quadrant it is in, because mathematically there are two ways of getting b divided by a to be positive. Questions here? Oh, go ahead. Radians is highly recommended. Uh, Degrees was sort of maybe high school freshman year, but now you guys got to be more comfortable with radians. The reason is this: whenever you do math with angle, you need to do a right. So express things in radians unless it is sort of meaningless to do it, right? If you're just expressing what is the angle here, sure, 45 degrees, okay. But for all other purposes, radians is sort of your safe world. Questions? Common signal. See, I didn't say king signal, I said common signal, sinusoidal function. We have a cosine here, amplitude A cosine 2 pi f0 t plus some theta phase and some b as the offset. And I'm looking at this sinusoidal signal from negative infinity to infinity. So for all time, I can talk about, and you have seen the classes, so this should not be too difficult to follow along. If there are any questions, of course, please ask me. What is A? A is the peak amplitude. And if I can call it the peak amplitude if I ignore the offset. Because if I include the offset, I need to actually say A plus B, right? Because it's A for the cosine and then offset to B. So if I'm ignoring the offset, then I can say A is the peak amplitude. 2A would be the peak to peak amplitude, regardless of the offset. F0 over here is my one frequency that is present in my cosine. If you have done things with musical instruments, you are probably very familiar with one tone, right? One particular tone, middle C or whatever that is. How do you figure out what that frequency is? Well, maybe you have some signal, maybe a square wave or maybe a sinusoid that is repeating at that particular frequency, and you can use a spectrum analyzer to look at that particular tone, right? So if you're looking at the signal on a spectrum analyzer, whether it be in software or an actual spectrum analyzer, you will see how many lines in frequency. On a frequency axis, how many lines will you see? If it's a cosine 100 hertz, on frequency, how many lines do you see? Only one at 100 hertz, right? But mathematically speaking, there is also going to be a replica of that at negative 100 hertz. Actually, I have to divide it by 2 pi. Suppose the frequency was 100, right? So I'll see a tone, a line at 100, and I will also see it at negative 100, right? So in frequency, in time it looks like this, right? In frequency it looks like this. One frequency. You use that for tuning and all those purposes. Let's see. F0 is your frequency in hertz. Omega naught is in radians per second, which is simply 2 pi F0. I have been burnt with this conversion many, many times. We think about frequency and we just go with it, right? We forget that factor of 2 pi. It happens a lot. And it is very frustrating. I've spent maybe hours and hours, and then I've realized, oh my gosh, I was using radians instead of hertz. So I guess there's no real way except for try to be as alert as possible with this conversion. T0 is your time period of the signal, which is the reciprocal of the frequency of 0. Theta is phase in radians or degrees, preferred in radians because you can perform mathematical operations. And also, when you're writing things in MATLAB, for example, it'll take it in radians and it'll do the math conveniently, as opposed to using functions to convert it to degrees. B is your DC offset, which is also the average of the signal. And like we talked about, I think we alluded to this in the last lecture. Where is that average of the signal going to appear in the frequency scale? 0. There it is, right? So if you're looking at a spectrum analyzer and you see something at f equals 0, you know the signal has an average, right? It doesn't have an average of 0. Let's see. So here we have some cosine. Actually, it has an offset of 3, a peak amplitude of 2, cosine 4 pi t plus pi o2. So pi o2 is your phase, right? And what is the frequency? 4 pi t, 2 pi ft. So f should be 2, right? So the frequency is 2 hertz, which means the time period is going to be half a second. And all of those things are listed over here. Frequency 2 hertz, time period is half a second. And because of that offset of 3, it has an average of 3. The peak amplitude is 2. However, if you include the offset, it will be 5. Right? And then if you have the frequency, you can obviously also calculate the angular frequency in radians per second. Just multiply by 2. So the goal of this slide is essentially to show you guys the 4 parameters of a sinusoid and to encourage you guys to go from the mathematical equation of a sinusoid to a sketch and backwards. Yeah? Sometimes, just think about this in a exam scenario, right? You have a cosine that you need to do something with, right? It's in an exam. It's a sketch. And within the first 2 minutes, you have realized that if I use the sketch, I will not go anywhere. I am better off expressing this sinusoid in mathematical form, in analytical form. You will be quick. You need to, at that time, be quick in taking a look at the plot and converting it into an equation you can work with, right? So guys need to be comfortable with doing that sort of a conversion from sketch to an analytical form. Right. The next common signal that we will be looking at is the real exponential signal. This was supposed to be here. All right. Real exponential signals. Okay, what does that mean? That means that they could also be complex exponential signals. I'm writing f of t as some a, some arbitrary constant a, e to the alpha t. Alpha could be greater than 0 or it could be less than 0. If alpha is greater than 0, I'm a little bit nervous. If alpha is less than 0, I'm pretty happy. Why is that? Sorry, oh no, e to the alpha t, right? So if alpha is greater than 0, it's going, ooh, it's growing with time. Things that grow with time are the first signs of unstable systems. That's why I sketch them in red, danger. The green things I like. Decaying with time I like. So as time goes on, things will decay down, right? So A is some scalar, right? I have made the signal in such a way that A. All right. I was like, what? 6 a.m. again? I heard it once this morning. Um, A and alpha belong to the set of real numbers here, and I'm looking at the signal for all time. A is the alpha t, alpha greater than 0, growing exponential. Alpha less than 0, then I've got a decaying exponential. And they have been sketched over here in the green and in the red. I pointed out things that are growing with time are sort of the first indicators of unstable behavior. Things that are decaying behavior. You guys agree with that, right? Because that same thing, that same concept, we are going to use that many times. This growing and decaying exponential will play a role when we go to Laplace transform from Fourier to Laplace. All right, let's see. If alpha equals 0, of course, then you have a e to the 0 t, that's 1, so just a constant, right? So constant, growing exponential, decaying exponential. But these are just exponential. So real exponential signals are just that, exponentials. Complex exponential signals may be not that simple. So let's take a look at the same signal, a e to the alpha t. However, a and alpha now belong to the set of complex numbers. So a could be complex, alpha could be complex. And in order for us to start thinking about how these complex exponential signals look like, I'm going to express a as a complex number, alpha as a complex number. For a, I'm going to use the polar form, r e to the j theta. And for alpha, I'm going to use the rectangular form, a plus jb. And I suppose you know what the real and imaginary part are for alpha, a and b. And the real and imaginary part of a is going to be what? R cosine theta. That's the real part. R sine theta is the imaginary part, right? So I've written up all of these over here. Alpha, A is the real part of alpha, B is the imaginary part of alpha. Real part of A is R cosine theta and R sine theta for the imaginary part of A, cap A. Both are complex. One is in polar form, one is in rectangular form. There is a reason for that. Why? Because later on when we try to sketch these out, those forms would have made our job easier, right? That's why those forms are chosen right now. Okay, so let's do it. Right? So f of t is a e to the alpha t. We have made an assumption for both a and alpha. Let's substitute that, multiply it out. So we've got r e to the j theta, e to the a plus jb, t. Multiply it out, what are you going to get? R is R, and then you can combine the things that have j in them. So you've got e to the at, and then you've got e to the j times theta plus bt. When you have e to the j phi, you can express that using Euler's identities as cosine phi plus j sine phi. If you are not a fan of complex numbers, Euler's identities, let me break this down for you. This whole class is going to deal with that. So get comfortable. So e to the j phi, right? We are writing that as cosine phi plus j sine phi, where phi is anybody who uses QuickTime Player a lot. Uh, find it. Find it. Oh. All right. Go away, go away, go away. All right. Stay gone away. Where were we? Yeah, we said this, right? We expressed r e to the j t, r e to the at as is, and we have expanded this using Euler's as cosine the angle plus j sine the same angle. Yeah, in our case, the angle is what? This guy, right? Everybody here is comfortable with Euler's identities? E to the jx cosine x plus e to the minus jx cosine x minus j sine x. And then what is that? The other one, flip it around. E to the jx plus e to the minus jx divided by 2 is cosine x, right? You guys know how to go backwards as well with exponentials to sinusoid. Everybody is looking at me like, man, it's been a while since I've seen that confusion. Ah, in the eyes. Don't need anything else. All right. The next thing that we'll do is this. Let's try to observe the real part of f of t and the imaginary part of f of t. What is the real part of f of t going to be? R e to the t is going to be multiplied by cosine theta plus bt is going to be there. So all of this is going to be the real part. Is it exponential? Is it sinusoidal? Yes. So it's going to be a decaying sinusoid or growing sinusoid, right? Earlier it was just doing that and that. Now there is a sinusoid imposed on that. So real part of f of t is going to be that. Imaginary part is going to be what? R e to the at sine theta plus bt. They are both going to be exponentials, decaying or growing exponentials. What does that depend on? Whether they decay or grow. Real part of alpha is correct. A, small a, yes. So if a is greater than 0, you're going to have growing. If a is less than 0, you're going to have decaying. But they are going to be exponentials with a sinusoid superimposed on them. That sinusoid is periodic. Let's do this. Periodic, just the sign. Okay, what is the time period? If it is periodic, the obvious next question is what is the time period? Who can find out the time period of this signal? Go ahead, Ian. B over 2 pi. En is almost correct. No. The Bn is B. So here, omega is B, right? That's right. Then F would be 1 over B. Sorry. See, I did that again. 2 pi over B. So time period should be B over 2 pi. Can frequency be negative? Time period be negative? Omega be negative? Now everything. All right. So it's a periodic sign, right? It's the same frequency, the same time period, and all that. And if you know the function, then you can find out the time period as well. Let's sketch it. Question about the math that is shown on this slide. Okay. All right. So that's how it looks like, right? So on the left here, with green, you're seeing a decaying sinusoid. Again, in green, good, decaying, stable, like that. When you have things on the left, as time increases, they are growing. Sort of a danger sign for me. That's going to happen when the real part of A, which is real part of alpha, which is small a, that is greater than 0. But that's how they look like, right? And this is the same thing, real part of f of t or the imaginary part. The only difference with real and imaginary is going to be one is a cosine, the other is a sine, right? But they're just going to be pi over 2 phase shift away. They're going to look the same though. Let's see. The questions about the plot, what we did here, we just plotted the real part of f of t or the imaginary part. They're both going to look the same. The only difference is one is a cosine, one is a sine. They are going to be either decaying or growing sinusoids, and they decay or grow exponentially. Next question is what happens if small a is 0? Well, if small a is 0, plug in over here e to the 0t, that is going to disappear. All you get is r cosine, r sine. So what do you have here? These are just going to be oscillations, right? They do not increase, they do not decrease, they will just be oscillations with a peak amplitude of small r, right? So this is going to be sinusoid. Sinusoids without a decaying or growing nature. What else can I say? They are going to be periodic, and they are going to be periodic with the time period, the same thing. B divided by 2 pi. Absolute of B divided by 2 pi. You guys see that? Now, let us talk about some other thing here. If I used red for growing exponentials, I used green for decaying exponentials, what should I use for this? And more importantly, what does that signify? One was unstable, one was stable behavior. What does this signify? Sorry? Unstable. All right, so unstable is here, stable is here, middle? Semi-stable, marginally stable is what is called. Marginally stable systems. So marginally stable systems is they are stable only for a certain criteria to be met. You disturb the things, it'll be unstable, right?
Which one is the real and imaginary part? Is the green one real?
Oh no, they're both. They're both sort of real and imaginary both, because one is r e to the at cosine, the other is r e to the at sine. So the only difference between the real and imaginary part is one is cosine, one is sine. So if you were to sketch a, let's see, at 0, what is it? If I zoom in here, this looks like I am sketching a sine for the red guy, and a cosine for the green guy. So the point is they're just going to be offset by a factor of pi over 2. So this or that. Questions? Stable, unstable, marginally stable. So marginally stable behavior is like this. If you're trying to balance something on your hand, right? You're going, right? It's balanced, but you're going to have to do oscillations for that, right? Like it's oscillating, a little bit of error or disturbance, it's going to fall off. So it's marginally stable system, right on the edge. When we get to feedback and stability, we will do some very interesting discussions on this unstable, stable, marginally stable behavior. And what will be beautiful about that is we will be able to tie it to the math. Go ahead.
So for these functions, if they were on an imaginary and real plane, would they just be circles that are getting smaller or larger?
If they were on the real, or yeah, that's right. So their magnitude is going to be bigger or smaller. Yes. For that, your x-axis is real, y-axis is imaginary, circle going big or small, because they are all sinusoidal. All right. So that was common signals. The next classification we are going to talk about is even versus odd signal. And like I said, VLC, what is that? Classification, even versus odd. Another way of classifying signals. You can really classify for this particular determination by a sketch. If it is symmetric about the vertical axis, then the signal is even. If the signal is symmetric about the origin, it is odd. Let's talk about signal, even signal. A signal x of t is called even if x of t is the same as x of minus t. You know what is x of minus t? X of t is this, x of t is minus this. Flip it about the vertical axis. If you flip it about the vertical axis, and if it is the same, then it is even for all time that has to satisfy. So, in other words, symmetrical about the y-axis. There is a way, the easiest way you can make that call of even versus odd is by a sketch. If you see that signal is symmetric about the vertical axis, you know it is even. But there is also a way to make that call after you look at its bracket-wise notation. So let me take an example here. I have x of t, which has that particular shape, going up from 0 to 1, also going up from 0 to negative 1, and then there are two discontinuities at negative 1 and 1, right? Beyond that, it is 0. If I was to take this, and if you look at it, it is symmetric about the y-axis, right? It is symmetric about the vertical axis, and you know it is an even signal. But if you were to take this into a bracket notation, let us say over here, we are trying to write the bracket notation for x of t. Time less than negative 1, 0. Yeah. Time greater than 1, 0. Between negative 1 and 0, it is the of 1 going down passes through the origin. Negative 1, no, negative t. Yeah. That is between negative 1 and 0. Between 0 and 1, line going up, slope 1 passes through origin, t. That is between 0 and 1. So you have written the signal in bracket notation over here for x of t. Now we said if we did x of minus t, it should be the same x of t. Let's do that. X of minus t, what do we need to change? T to negative t. That's all, right? 0 stays 0. T becomes negative t. Yeah, you see this? I'm going to just highlight things that are changing. This changed. This changed. This changed. Also, this changed here, this changed here. What else changed? This changed here, right? All the t's have become negative t's. You guys okay with that? All right. If that is true, 0 when negative t less than negative 1 is the same as saying 0 for t greater than 1. Yeah, so multiply the whole thing by negative 1. Change the sign, change the sign of the numbers as well. Yeah, where did we see this? We saw this guy right here. And similarly, let me try this. This to, no, 0, 1, alright. So here this guy maps to this guy maps to this guy, and then this guy will map to this guy. Didn't work. So using the bracket notation, sort of a lengthier way of doing it over here, but I wanted you could also reach to the same conclusion about even versus odd using this in the bracket notation. Questions about how do you identify whether a signal is even or not? Symmetric about the y-axis. It has to satisfy x of t equals x of minus t. X of minus t is equivalent to taking the signal and flipping it about the y-axis, vertical axis. That applies for all time. All right, let's move on here to the next classification, which is odd signal. Odd signal, symmetric about origin. What is the condition? X of t should be the same as negative x of minus t. When you say x of minus t, you are flipping it about the vertical axis. When you say minus in the front, you are flipping it about the horizontal axis. So vertical, horizontal, symmetric about the origin. If that happens to be the same, then you say it is going to be an odd signal. Things like this. Very nice. These are, that's an odd signal, right? You can clearly see it's symmetric about the origin. And we can also do the other check, right? Okay, what would, when we flip it about the vertical axis, what would it look like? Well, it would look something like this, right? When you flip it about the vertical axis, that's what it will look like. And then now when you flip it about the horizontal, it will sort of exactly match the black one. Yeah? And you can do that even for the other side. When you flip this guy about the vertical, it becomes that. When you flip it on the about the horizontal, it maps to the other black one, right? You see that? So I want you guys to start seeing what this negative corresponds for and what this negative corresponds for, right? You see, so minus t, that's like a horizontal, sorry, flipping about the vertical. And when you have, so this is for the vertical with respect to the vertical, and this is for the horizontal. All right, let me erase this so that there is no confusion later on. Symmetric about the origin is what you can say. And you could also reach the same conclusion by looking at the bracket notation. X of t, over here, what we are doing is, we are saying it is 0 below negative 1, it is 0 for time greater than 1, but between negative 1 and 1, it is a line with a slope of 1 passing through the origin. In other words, t. So 0, time greater than negative 1, t between negative 1 and 1, and 0 beyond 1. When you flip it, what do you get? X of minus t. So instead of writing it using two steps, instead of saying negative t is less than negative 1, t is greater, right? So I hope you guys know where that came from, right? Yeah? Next, t became negative t, and I also have negative 1 less than negative t less than 1. multiply it out with a negative 1, you get negative 1 less than t less than 1. Moving on, you have 0 for time negative t greater than 1, multiply it out with a minus sign, you get t less than negative 1. So what do we know? We know that the only difference between x of t and x of minus t is this negative sign. In other words, we can say x of t equals negative x of minus t. So it satisfies the criteria to meet the odd signal. An interesting result for odd signals is the total area under the signal is 0. Because it is symmetric about the origin, it is the area under the curve. Total area under the curve is 0. Can you guys tell me an example of an odd signal? Ian, your time is where? Sine. Yes, so you were saying that that was the king, right? Like it is the king for in terms of odd. A sinusoidal signal is an odd signal. How about a even signal? Cosine, right? A cosine would be an even signal. All right, let's see. Some properties of even versus odd. And we are talking about these properties in the context of multiplying the two signals, x of t multiplied by y of t. Before we actually talk about the properties, I want you guys to sort of picture this mathematical operation that is happening. When you say x of t multiplied by y of t, what is really happening? Multiplication, sure, but what with what? Is it time per time, like 1 second is multiplying by the value in 1 second? Is it x of 1 multiplied by y of 1, x of 1.1 multiplied by y of 1.1, and so on? Does that mean that? Yes, it exactly means that. Right? So when you say x of t multiplied by y of t, we are talking about for each time multiplication of the values in those two signals. Why is it important to discuss this? Because we will have some other type of signal operations which don't mean this. It might mean something else, right? So here, when you're talking about multiplication, we are talking about time by time value multiplication. All right, so let's see. There are three properties over here, and we'll sort of prove very quickly one of them. If x of t and y of t, depending on whether they are even or not, what can you tell me about the product? Well, if x of t is even and y of t is even, then x of t multiplied by y of t is also going to be an even signal. Cosine multiplied by cosine, you get a cosine squared, which is also an even signal. If x of t is even and x of y of t is odd signal, which means sine x multiplied by cosine x, you get something that is odd. Even times odd, odd. Odd times odd, even. Can you prove the middle property here? Very easily you can prove that. How? We have said x of t is even, right? So we have said x of t is even here. If x of t is even, then it has to satisfy that condition. If y of t is odd, then it has to satisfy this condition. Now we are talking about the product of the two, right? So the product of the two, let us define g of t as, we are defining it, g of t is equivalent to the product of x and y. So when you take the product of x, who wants to talk to me? There was a cell phone, the vibration was going on. Oh, all right. I was just wondering if the cops have found me. All right. So g of t is the product of x and y. And because we have said x of t is even and y of t is odd, I can substitute for x of t from here, x of minus t, and I can substitute for y of t in its equivalent form, which is negative y of negative t. Because it's multiplication, you can bring out the negative side up front. You've got negative x of minus t multiplied by y of minus t, which is negative y of g of minus t, right? Because if you say g of minus t, you get what? X of minus t, y of minus t. So that would be negative g of minus t, which qualifies g to be an odd signal. Very easy. Questions here about properties of odd versus even when you multiply them. Now uh, we talked about what? What's the condition to make it even versus odd? How about finding the even and odd components of a signal? Because guess what? You can break any signal into its into its even component and odd component, and add them up to get back your signal. Any signal. That statement is sort of written over here, right? Any signal can be decomposed into an even part and an odd part, even component and an odd component. And when you multiply them out, you will get back your original signal. So you're using a subscript of E and O to indicate the even component and the odd component respectively. What is the even component? EV of x of t is x of t plus x of minus t divided by 2. Half of the signal, and the way you are getting half of that signal, x of t plus x of minus t. Signal plus the vertically flipped signal. Add them, divide it by 2, and you get the even component. Odd component, the only difference is there's a negative sign in the middle. X of t minus x of minus t divided by 2. And you can take any signal and you can prove this. And mathematically, what happens when you add these two things? This guy cancels out with this, you get half x here, you get back your x, right? So mathematically, it's very, very easy to sort of prove that it is going to work. Okay, and you can also ask this question: is the even part of x of t actually even? In other words, is this even? How do you know? How do you know if that is even? This should be quick. What makes a signal even? X of t should be equal to x of minus t, right? That's it. So if this is x of t, what would be minus? That would be minus, right? And it is the same thing as before. So it is even. And you could say that same thing about this. This is the odd component of a signal. Is odd component of a signal really odd? All you have to do is do a minus on the time or the flipping about the vertical as well as the horizontal. When you flip about the vertical, horizontal, you get that. And when you flip about the horizontal, you get that. You are back to where you started. Yeah, so it is actually odd. Let me sort of erase these so that later on there is no confusion. All right, let's do some examples. We have some arbitrarily sketched out signal here, x of t, and we are trying to find sketch component of x of t. Oh boy, really? Man, I'm really slow in person. I usually am really fast in person. All right, we'll do this example and stop. Sketch the odd component of x of t. X of t is this particular signal. Let's see. I'm going to quickly write out the function piecewise, bracket notation. So between 0 and 2, it is 2. between negative 2 and 2, what is it? Going up with a slope of 1 with the y-intercept 2e plus 2. Right? Slope of 1 going up, y-intercept is 2, t plus 2, mx plus c. All right. So I've got that. What I'm going to do is sketch the odd component of the signal. All right. The odd component of the signal, the first thing that I would do is flip it about the vertical axis. So if I flip this guy about the vertical axis, I would get something like this, right? Yeah. And this would actually be x of minus t. And then there is a 2 there. There is a, what is the equation here? Negative t plus 2. And then this time is 2 here, 0 here, 2 here, done, right? X-axis is time. I've got x of minus t here. So I need to do what? I need to find the odd component, right? So I need to do this. I need to do x of t minus x of minus t divided by 2, right? So let's do this for time less than 2. What would it be before 2? Negative 2. 0. All right, so 0 here, right? And I suppose we can also say the same thing about that beyond 2, right? Beyond 2, it is also going to be 0. Yeah? So that's 2 there. And this is negative 2 there, right? 0 there, 0 there. Now, between negative 2 and 0, what is it going to be? Huh? So you see this? T plus 2 minus 2 divided by 2, right? Yeah? This minus this divided by 2. So you are going to get t divided by 2, right? You guys okay with me? How about between 0 and 2? 2 minus divided by 2, right? This guy minus this guy divided by 2. Yeah? So it is going to be t divided by 2 between negative 2 and 2. Yeah? Alright. Let's just sketch it. So it's going up with a slope of half. Something like that? No. Me, you, who was that? You guys get the idea. What is the height here? Is it symmetric about the origin? Yes. Alright, so odd component, we have done it. Let's just write the bracket notation for this. What is the bracket notation for this? Xo of t equals what? T divided by 2 between negative 2 less than t less than 2, 0 otherwise. I'm trying to stay away from the discontinuities, right? Like you guys see that I'm a little bit more careful as I'm going from one lecture to the other. I'm sort of avoiding the conversation about discontinuities, and there's a reason for that, right? The reason is we are going to later talk about impulses and what is going to happen when you are going to be differentiating at those discontinuities, which is stay away from that for our discussion here. All right, time is up, man. I don't feel like going home. You guys were all in person, I would have held you for another 20 minutes. We were having so much fun, except five people were sleeping. I know who you were, but all right. I'll see you guys when in person next Thursday, online on Wednesday. Please be careful over the Memorial Day weekend. Oh, Monday we don't have class on Monday. We have on Wednesday. Just for next Monday, Memorial Day. Yeah, so Monday is pushed to Wednesday. Yeah, so yeah, I thought it just started and then you have a break. Yeah.
So for this last example, we look from -2 to 0 and then subtracted them out.
Sorry, what is it?
For this last example, to
Yes.
get the odd function,
Yes.
we did like 2 plus over 2.
Yes.
And
So I did that subtraction and division by 2
right,
for -2 to 0,
right,
and I also did that for 0 to 2.
okay,
And it just happened to be the same,
right,
P over 2.
okay, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then I had another question about the energy.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, let me actually pull it up. Right, so I was sort of confused about the periodicity of it. So energy signals, what if you have something that's not periodic? If it goes like up and then down, like with the ramp.
Right. So only for the time at which it is defined. Right. So only for the time it is defined, you're going to say. So essentially, what you're going to do is you're going to leave this t as is.
Okay.
Treat that as a variable.
Right.
Do a magnitude squared. Evaluate this. Well, this is power, right? So here, evaluate this function. You're going to get that in the form of t, cap T, right? You're going to divide that by 2t.
Okay.
Maybe something will cancel out, maybe not. And then you will evaluate for that time.
Okay.
So you will treat the cap T literally as some variable.
Okay. All right. So then something periodic like sine would have power,
Right.
but it wouldn't have infinite energy. So right. Okay. And then if something was decaying, then it would have a finite energy. But then I think my confusion is if it has a finite energy, why can't it have power?
Because this one will have, so here, if it has finite energy,
Right.
this one is finite.
Yes.
But when you do the 1 over 2t limit t tends to infinity, you're going to get that finite number divided by infinity.
Well, I think okay. So I think that's the crux of the confusion for me is that when we're talking about infinity, we're not talking like it's like -10 to 10 seconds. Like,
Right.
We're not talking about skipping
All the time.
all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
Okay.
So because of that really large number in the denominator, you're going to get a 0.
I think that makes sense. Because I know sometimes we treat infinity as the time in which it's defined.
Right.
All right, thanks.
Who wants to go first?
Those are lines.
What?
Just there's a line.
Man, listen, you have not met.
I have a little question on this part.
Yeah.
Which I think partially conflicting to a set in here.
I think it might be
Because in here what it's saying is the frequency is half, right?
Yes.
So omega over 2 pi should be frequency. But like omega over 2 pi in here become a period.
Sorry.
What's good?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, hold on.
Alright.
Let me
Weird, yeah.
let me walk you there.
Yep.
This is B, right?
Yep.
So this is okay.
Yeah, B is omega, right?
Okay. So what is omega equals 2 pi f, right?
Yep.
So f should be omega divided by 2 pi.
Yep.
So it should be b divided.
Yep.
Oh,
It's completely inverse. Yeah, that's. Yep.
you are right.
Good luck with it.
Yeah, that's curious on that. Yep.
You are right. You are right. You are right.
That's why I'm seeing the
It's the inverted.
frequency in the period is inverted.
So I think this one is 2 pi divided by this. Huh? No. This should be in the denominator. This should be like this. Oh, thank you for catching this.
Yeah. Yeah. This.
Yes. Did I say that even here? Oh man.
Yeah.
Yes.
Alright.
All right. I'm going to clarify this with the students. All right. I'm glad that you caught it. What's up?
I just want to make sure I know like where everything's posted. Like I got on, the
Oh.
LMS showed up.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
there's like a WebEx for Wednesday.
Element showed up for you?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, no,
that.
because I only got into my SIS like yesterday to pay it, so that showed up today. I
Let
just
me
want to make
see
sure
here.
there's like WebEx and all that shit.
What internet connection are you talking about? Oh, all right. Here, forget about it. Let me just show you. Uh, 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 Give me 1 second. Um, so for our class, there's a Piazza page set up, and if you go into resources,
That's all the stuff.
you see that there is TA information here,
Okay.
their office hour information here,
Okay.
homework, lecture notes, before class, after class, video lecture links from the first lecture,
Okay.
and then sort of the general resources, syllabus, how are we meeting in person, supplemental videos.
Okay. Awesome. I will be bothering the shit out of you this semester because I'm
Yeah,
behind
man.
in terms of this material. But okay, I should be able to find everything. And then Wednesday's online.
Wednesday 2 to 4 online, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Just at the beginning. I don't know how the semester will evolve.
Okay, yeah, but yeah, no.
I hope so. Here, I think we could have easily fit like 10, 15, 20 more people in this classroom.
Yeah, without
But
it being
yeah, but they really want us to kind of go off of what we did in the spring.
yeah. So is it like split 50? Like we
Yeah.
don't come in on Mondays?
Yeah, that
Okay.
I
I was
had to
about
do
to show
that.
up on Monday. So that's
Well, oh yeah, yeah. But Wednesday,
Wednesday's a holiday.
right? Every Wednesday you were going to show up.
Yeah,
But the thing is this: there are 75 people. 31 is the capacity of this room.
yeah.
So I sort of split them in half, and I'm counting on some people to be remote. There are about 14 students in this class that are remote, so we are all good. But there's no demand. People are not here.
Well, people.
Let me stop recording because we are recording everything here.